Well, high-level talks in Geneva between the US and Russia have now ended. And as predicted by each side, there was no breakthrough on Ukraine's border crisis. Russian troops remain massed at its border with Ukraine, still stoking fears of invasion. And the US insists NATO will not limit membership to anyone. Our Europe correspondent Simon McGregor-Wood has more.
The American mission in Geneva was where US officials used to meet their Soviet counterparts during the Cold War. Judging by the frosty body language, not much has changed. After the talks, Russia's deputy foreign minister denied his country has any plans to invade Ukraine.
We explained to our colleagues that in no way do we plan or intend to quote-unquote attack Ukraine. And all the arrangements regarding the combat readiness of the armed forces are made within our national territory. Thus, there's no reason to fear an escalation scenario in that respect.
But he repeated future NATO membership for Ukraine is an absolute red line. The US says Ukraine's right to decide its own strategic partnerships is not up for negotiation and called for Russia to withdraw troops from Ukraine's borders.
We will not allow anyone to slam closed NATO's open door policy, which has always been central to the NATO alliance.
In Brussels, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg held talks with the Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister. On Wednesday, NATO ambassadors will hold crisis talks with Russia. On Thursday, the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe will meet with EU representation. But expectations for progress are low.
I don't think we can expect that these meetings will solve all the issues. What we are hoping for is that we can agree on a way forward, that we can agree on a series of meetings, that we can agree on the process.
Not only does Russia want guarantees Ukraine and Georgia will never join NATO, it wants to impose significant limits on NATO deployments in countries which joined after the collapse of the Soviet Union, demands which NATO and the West will never grant. In Ukraine itself, many people are worried their politicians are not directly involved in the talks and that their interests may be sacrificed. There seems little prospect of NATO intervening militarily if Russia invades Ukraine, but US officials on Monday again promised significant new sanctions and increased troop presence in Eastern Europe if it does. Monday's talks are the beginning of a long diplomatic process with both sides setting out red lines that may be difficult to resolve. Simon McGregor-Wood, TRT World.
Gregory Simons is an associate professor at the Institute for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Uppsala University in Sweden. He explains why finding a breakthrough between Russia and Ukraine will be so difficult.
Theoretically, it's intended to resolve tensions or at least to dampen them down, given the amount of guesswork and fear which is as a result of this guesswork. But I would think that there is going to be nothing concrete that comes from it because, on the one hand, Russia has made some preconditions, and on the other hand, the American preconditions ignore those which the Russians have stated as being central. So this becomes an exercise in talking, but will unlikely result in anything concrete at the end of it. Gorbachev was given promises that NATO would not expand, and Jack Matlock, the former ambassador to the Soviet Union, confirms this. And this has been broken, so historically there is a case of this. If we fast forward to 2008, when you had the talks of a membership action plan for both Georgia and Ukraine in April, and then, of course, in August, we had the 2008 Georgian-Russian war. But if we look objectively, Ukraine does not meet the criteria to be able to join NATO. So this then becomes more of a geopolitical game because why is there talk of membership when the basic criteria for joining NATO are not met? So this is one other aspect which should be taken into account. One can understand why Russia brings troops closer to the Ukrainian border, given the fact that Ukraine has half of its army in and around Donbas region and seems to be preparing for an offensive there. So this is a tit for tat. Russia is probably not going to back down.